Well, welcome, Ray. I'm
Thank you.
so glad to have you here today.
Delighted.
Someone with your experience in manufacturing and ERP is going to provide so much value to the viewers of this podcast today.
I hope so.
Um, it's just amazing. You've been at this a while. You've had,
Yeah.
I'm sure, good experiences and bad experiences with ERP, both the selection process and the implementation process.
Right.
And then, did it deliver on its promises? These are the kinds of things I want to cover in today's discussion.
Great.
But I kind of want to kick it off and just get to know you a little bit better
Sure.
and your background in manufacturing. So, where would you say your journey in manufacturing started? And when did you first actually hear the term ERP and think, what is this and what am I going
Wow.
to do with it?
Good questions. Let's see. Where did the journey start? I'm the youngest of four boys, and I grew up at a time when, excuse me, when the dads didn't have a man cave. My dad had a shop. So when something broke or needed to build something or whatever, he went down into the shop and he had a lathe and a drill press and pipe wrenches, you name it. And I was just at his side watching him do stuff. Had older brothers. I was the one under the car helping him change the oil. So, I was always into kind of how things worked, kind of the mechanics of things. Fast forward, although I don't have much technical training, my 40 plus years in manufacturing have allowed me to be as I refer to it, engineer by osmosis. I've just been around technology for so long, and I have a knack for it. So that's been enjoyable. ERP. I'm gonna rewind that a little bit. When I was in grad school, way back, we talked about MRP. Yeah, which was material resource planning that ultimately evolved into enterprise resource planning. So we're probably back into the late 80s, early 90s was when it first came up. And that was something big companies did. The small and medium sized manufacturers that I was involved in at the time, very much a manual paper based system, not even a lot of Excel at the time. So it's evolved a lot. Automation first showed up in the accounting side, and then it started to show up on the design side because I came up at a time when there were still drafting boards. So that was I got to see how the technology was coming for manufacturing and where it was being applied in smaller companies, and it was an interesting evolution.
Um, so you were talking about MRP versus ERP.
Yeah.
Do you think there's still both? How do you see that in the market today? Or
Well,
is it all considered ERP?
I think it's all considered ERP. I think it's a function of the depth of how you're using it, because the enterprise resource planning is to me more holistic. I mean, it's covering all facets of what's going on, and some companies that you may buy an ERP but not use it fully, and that's how I kind of see. Yeah, there probably are still some MRP users, but it's because they haven't fully embraced all of the tools that are available in the software platform they have.
Yeah. So when you say MRP, that has to do with the planning aspect, right?
More so, yeah.
Yeah. And why is that critical for manufacturers to use the software to help with their planning?
To automate the planning, or at
Mhm.
least bring some tools. One of the biggest trends I've seen in my manufacturing career is the shift from high volume discrete manufacturing. You put in that die, you run millions of parts,
Mhm.
um, to a time where there's more high mix, low volume. So the amount of changeovers are happening much faster, and that requires a lot of different skills, not the least of which being able to understand how to properly sequence. Okay, what's the next logical product to put in this work cell? So I just think that manufacturers today are juggling. They're juggling a lot more information,
Mhm.
and not that it's impossible to do it by hand, but why?
Right.
Why go through that?
So it's gotten a lot more complex.
It has.
And to be competitive, to be a small manufacturer, you've got to be very nimble
Oh,
today.
no kidding.
And to be nimble requires tools,
Yeah.
is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
It just requires a lot more tools.
The interesting thing is, a lot of the companies that I see, the newer ones, it's easier for a new startup to kind of come in with the right attitude to embrace technology. I saw somewhere someone had published that over the last, I don't know, it was the last year or so, there was over like 1,000 CNC shops established, new ones
Really?
across the country, and which I find fascinating, but not surprising, because there's there's a gap to be exploited if you have a predisposition for technology, if you have a comfort with it, and you bring it to manufacturing, versus companies that may have a wonderful 50, 75, 100-year legacy. Sometimes that legacy can be a drain. I wish I could attribute the quote, but I once heard, "Don't be a prisoner to the decade in which your manufacturing business was established."
Oh, oh my goodness.
So,
Yeah.
which makes so much sense.
I know
Yeah.
I've heard the term, well, I asked someone in
Yeah.
a process audit, well, why do you do it this way?
Oh my God.
And the answer is, well, that's the way we've always done
Yeah.
it. And I've heard that answer so many
Oh
times, I
yeah.
can't even tell you.
Oh, it's tough to break.
It
Well,
is.
because it brings it's change. It's, manufacturing. On the one hand, we're in a time when there's so much technology that can really drive significant change, and I mean good change in an organization: profitability, flexibility, resilience,
Hmm.
all of those, good things. But if you don't manage the change properly, because you still need people to do this type of thing, you're only going to be as successful as your least interested employee. That's what's going to stop you. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it is. It does certainly come down to change.
yeah,
And I know you're very passionate about empowering manufacturers
sure,
to make that transition,
right, right.
to make that change around technology. I'd like to hear a little bit about your experience with actually implementing some of those changes. Do you have any stories you can tell me of changes that you implemented around technology?
I think back to my very first job working for a small injection molding company. I think we had 35 employees, ran 3 shifts. That was my first job out of college. And I remember introducing the first, I guess, some MRP functionality.
Yeah,
Uh,
it
we,
was new anyhow.
everything was new. You could run it on a compact 286. We had one that was in the office for the accounting manager to use. Everything was manually input,
Uh-huh.
but the gee whiz moment was, wow, look how easy it is to generate financials at the end of the month. So there
Yeah.
was still very much a lag in terms of, it wasn't, you didn't really know daily production from the system.
Hmm.
You knew daily production when you came through the door and you saw the bins with the travelers on them. It's like, okay, looks like third shift made a bunch of parts. That's good. You check the MRB area. So that was kind of the first system, and it worked because, as a practical matter, there were like 3 people that used it. They were all in the office. It was transparent, or it wasn't visible, and it didn't matter to the people in the shop because there was no change in how they
Mm,
had to operate.
gotcha.
So that's fine, but it's not scalable. Certainly
Right.
not today, in today's world. Fast forward, um, again, there was always that lag. Companies that were more comprehensive and being able to, okay, we've got a system, we're rolling it through different parts of the organization, we're collecting data, but a lot of it was, we fell in love with what the ERP sales folks said was possible,
Mm.
because we had never done any of those things in the business before. So you kind of lose sight of, well, what's our business now versus, boy, we could push a button and get all these charts and graphs. Doesn't matter, or didn't matter at the time. It's like, well, do you really understand what your processes are that you're going to migrate over?
Hmm.
Because one of the big mistakes I've lived through is, you go from current state, make the change to an ERP system, but enter the ERP world in your desired state. Hey, here's where I want it to be. We've never done the process that way before on the floor, but now, because it more easily fits the ERP system, not our current workflows,
Hmm.
we'll do it this way. And I've seen floor will grind to a halt.
Really?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Just to the point where, it's
You
the
changed the floors process rather than having the ERP mirror what the floor did. You instead changed what the floor did to mirror what the ERP.
in many cases where in my experience where we had come from was an ERP system that we had outgrown, so there was a lot of customization. So you end up with a developer on your payroll, just somebody that's like the furniture. They're around all the time because they're the ones that built the customizations, and they're the only ones that can manage. Hey, there's an upgrade in the core system. Now I've got to change my customization to match. So it was a great annuity for the developer.
Yeah.
But the problem is, once you kind of outgrow both, here comes ERP vendor says, we can fix all of that. We can take all of this. Here comes the conversation about how wonderful the future is going to be. And then when you really get into it, you start having the conversations, but we're used to doing it this way. They're like, that would be an expensive customization. If you just make this little change, you can now do it the way that's easy for the ERP system. And you get kind of coaxed into it sometimes, and that's not healthy. You really lose your way.
Mm,
You know.
mm. Do you think that could have been prevented if with a better ERP selection process? Do you
Yes.
think that what would on hindsight, how would you have prevented that?
Um, Getting more people involved sooner. As I shared earlier, I listened to your conversation with Cheryl
Yeah.
Wellman, and I thought her insights were spot on in terms of getting everyone involved in the selection process, because she brought up things that we saw. We had selected something, and it was like, boy, it's going to be the graphics on your computer are going to be so great
Hmm.
and enjoyable to see, only to find out that we still had a workforce that was largely not computer savvy. And I'm not talking, making pivot tables in Excel. I mean, just navigating around a screen. It frightened them. And, we really had to take a step back and start doing some fundamental training, which was okay. But then here comes the front office going, we still have a timeline here. And, yeah, but your timeline didn't include or didn't account for, we've got to take a couple steps back before we move forward.
So you're talking, is it the tension that you felt between trying to get production out the door and trying to input into the ERP system? Have you felt a tension in that?
Well, part of it is, and the cutover.
Ah,
The managing the, well, we bought it. This is a big investment, whatever it was at the time, $100,000, a couple 100,000. And it's like you put together a target plan, the owner signs off. It's a big check. Owner wants to know how's it going. You don't want to see, red bars on the Gantt chart. It's like, well, hurry this thing up, get it in place because it's supposed to, you told me it was going to drive all this value. I need it implemented, sooner versus later. So the first thing is you really need an owner that understands
mm,
why the ERP is there and what good looks like. Maybe that's the thing.
yeah.
I think seek out companies that really embrace their ERP system, where it's like an invisible extra department in their company that just adds all this value, but it's not on the clock. You know what I mean? It's because there's some automation there to it.
Yeah.
But we always scrambled in the early days to find similar use cases. The ERP vendors would come in. Well, let's take you through the sample company. We're going to build a bicycle. And it's like, well, we don't build bicycles. We build medical devices that have a lot of outside services. And, so sometimes it's not an apples to apples thing. The question to ask would have been, can you introduce me to other medical device
Ah,
manufacturers of our size that are big fans,
yeah.
and talk to them and understand what that was like, basically the user group to find out. So I think there's missed opportunities.
It's interesting that you say that because that's exactly why I'm passionate about being here today,
Yeah,
about having this conversation.
sure.
Because what you described is if I could speak with someone else who has experienced this,
Right.
then perhaps I would make a better choice when we're making this big investment.
Right.
And companies get married to these investments
Oh,
for a long, long
oh
time.
yeah,
And struggle with, where do I cut it off? Like, how far do I go when it's not working?
yeah,
And where do I draw a
yeah.
line?
Surrender. Yeah,
Surrender.
yeah.
Did you ever have to surrender?
Boy, it came. Oh, we did. Yeah, to tell you the truth, we did. Company I was with, we had a manufacturing facility in Singapore, and there was like a technology, part of government that was making something available for small manufacturers, and we took it on. It was a low cost investment, but at the end of the day, it was a lot of effort and it did nothing. So we just kind of threw it into neutral for a while. Fortunately, it was a relatively small site, and we were okay. Eventually, we wound up going to a common platform across all locations, which was another story. But yeah, having to abandon that one, it was like, we're entering data. Why? What's it doing for us? Because we're still generating the reports and tracking things kind of like all we always did,
Yeah.
which to me means, yeah, it was cheap and we took advantage of it, but it did nothing. And at the end, it could cost us because we put a lot of time and effort that we got nothing out of. So,
When you look at the ERP landscape
yeah.
today, things have changed a lot,
Oh
haven't
man,
they?
yeah, they have. Yeah, the
Right?
cloud. I like the industry specific stuff that's out there. I look at like the evolution of say ProShop
Yeah.
and Paul Van Meter and those guys. I mean, I've followed them since about COVID through now, and I just thought it was amazing to see someone build a brand and a passionate following in the ERP space.
Hmm.
And it's and you think about why, and it's that whole they ran a machine shop business, couldn't find what they wanted, built something that worked for them, saw that it was something that could be scaled, made it available, to other businesses. So it was somebody that had really thought through the use application
Right.
for that tool. And I don't know how it does outside of the CNC world, but I know within it, it's like, anytime you get unsolicited feedback on LinkedIn about, boy, I love this ERP system. Who says that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who says that?
There are a few that get really high
Right.
reviews,
Yeah.
but I think that fit is a really important
Yeah.
piece of it, so that people don't have to go in and do those customizations you were talking about and have somebody on staff.
Yep.
Boy, what a risk that is, right?
Oh,
You have,
yeah. Yeah.
somebody call them the hit by the bus syndrome. You're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, you're like terrified. Like, if anything ever happens, we're in so much trouble
Yeah.
because there's only one person who really understands this.
Yeah.
And I see that sometimes people think that if I go with a larger ERP, well, I'll avoid the hit by the bus
Mm-hmm.
syndrome because ideally they're big.
Yep.
I'll find other people with experience in that.
Yep.
But then the downside is with those bigger ones, they're not built for the niche. They're not built necessarily for the CNC machine company
Yeah.
either.
Yep.
So I think it's kind of cool how we're getting to a point where there's getting to be enough competition in the market
Uh-huh.
where you can actually find something that's both a fit,
Yep.
hopefully,
Yep. Yep.
and find the fit and have the assurance that you aren't going to be left with just one person who knows how to
Good
make
point.
it work for your company.
Yeah. Good point.
So,
Yeah.
so we're definitely in a better place than we were years ago
That's for sure. Yeah.
when it comes to that. But the fundamentals of how to get an organization to buy into that change, how to go through a selection process,
Yeah.
seem to have not changed, I don't think, very much. What do you think?
In some instances, it's a function of leadership knows they have to have it, but they don't understand it deeply enough to ask all of the questions. And that can be a tall order, but
Mm-hmm.
we know we have to have it. Sometimes it's just a financial decision. Sometimes it's the CFO or the controller that's doing the selection with minimal input from the shop. So it's still a tough thing to do, and especially in a small organization because you've got a lot of owner operators wearing multiple hats and not a lot of spare time in their day. So sometimes you look for the quick fix or what's being presented as the quick fix and the shortest path to implementation. But I really think you You got to be honest with yourself about what's really involved in fully implementing the ERP system. I go back to what's good look like when this is done, and you go home and you're going to talk to your family and they go, how was your day at work? And, you may talk about all the challenges you faced and solved the customer problem and helped somebody on the floor. You shouldn't be talking about your ERP system.
It's kind of in the background, right?
It should be.
It should be.
It should be.
And if you're talking about, you're probably mad at it.
Yeah, I agree. No, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. So what have you been a part of any ERP selection processes or in the past or you would call them ERP or MRP?
I have. Again, previous company, we had international footprint and had a conglomeration of different systems.
Okay.
Every location was running something different. And it was a function of, hey, when you started, you did something small. I mentioned the facility in Singapore. I think that was probably 60 or 70 employees. We started a facility in Shanghai, and we first got going. There was local tools you could buy and use. The one thing you got to consider is if you're working internationally, not all ERP systems that have an accounting package are recognized. In China in particular,
Interesting.
in China in particular, how your accounting is managed needed to basically align with like China GAAP.
Oh,
And so
boy, that would be a challenge to find a solution to cover that.
what it does is it pushes you up market. So if you needed something that scaled, that Shanghai facility that we started and we had 10, 20 people, when I left there after 10 years, we had 1,000. So it was a very different.
Right. You went from 10 to 1,000 people
Yeah. Over the span, it was 10 years.
over 10 years.
Over the span of 10 years.
And you started off with what was the key system running your business when you first started?
There was a lot of manual. I can't recall the name of the tool that was there, but it was at a time when you could throw a lot of people at something.
So that was the solution.
That was it was easy to have a back room, with 20 people that basically were manually entering shift reporting into Excel.
Okay.
There you
go.
And would could at least get you the basics. And at the time the economics worked. It was like, instead of committing to $1 zillion on an ERP system, the good thing with the Shanghai facility is we built the processes first. It's like when we started that facility, the people running it knew manufacturing.
Okay.
So it was like, if, we're going to set up, stamping line, here's how it goes. Order entry looks like this. So we started with very good processes that then went to manual data entry that then went to a level of automation so that the numbers could be crunched in a little more timely manner. That ultimately went to an Epicor. We put in Epicor because that was recognized. They had a sufficiently large and approved user base. We could use it in China. We could use it in Malaysia. We did it all over the world. Mexico. We could put it in those places. But that was a big jump, going from kind of the smaller customized, and then you step up to like an Epicor. And that was a bigger challenge, I think, than we expected.
Did you feel like Epicor was that one of just a very small number of choices you had, considering your requirement
It's
for
a pyramid.
international?
Yeah, you're starting to move towards the top of that pyramid because, again, at the bottom there's something for everybody. Then you start narrowing the sort criteria. It's like, well, we're manufacturing, okay. We're of a certain size. We need to do it internationally, and so it was Epicor, it was versions of SAP, at the time, and we weren't as equipped as we should have been to roll that out. I think we made too many compromises, and again, different sites, because the GMs in different locations approached it a little differently. The Shanghai facility held their ground more so on, no, you're going to match our process. We're just going to automate it. So they did about the best. It was the U.S. side where we kind of stumbled the most. There were a lot of assumptions. U.S. side was HQ. 50 years of we know what we're doing. And here comes the technology, and that's where you find out it's like, whoa, now that everybody needs to use it, you find out your workforce really isn't ready for it. The data collection needing to be real time before things could get released in the system. We went from thinking, it was going to come off the press, the operator was going to read the counter, enter some
Yeah.
information, and we had trouble getting that to stick, so wound up adding people to the floor to do the
To
data
add
entry.
to add the numbers.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm like, this is going backwards.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That's interesting. So at the beginning, you were having to add people in the back office to go write down the information. And then even after you had it, you couldn't get the operators
it
to
was
enter the
couldn't
numbers?
get it done consistently. Yeah, that
Really?
was brutal. And we were the biggest gap. I see this from manufacturing. A lot of people will brag about their OEE. It's like, man, a spindle uptime on this machine is
For those who don't know what OEE is, what do you explain what that is, just briefly?
oh boy, I knew you were going to ask me. Operational efficiency, and you're going to want to cut this.
It's a metric
Yeah,
used by automotive, usually, isn't it? In aerospace?
aerospace is using it.
And it has to do with how many pieces.
Well, it looks at uptime, yield. Yield is important because it subtracts off, versus kind of what was expected,
Yes.
in there. So it's typically expressed as a kind of a ratio or a percentage. If your OEE on a piece of equipment is 50%,
Overall equipment
there you
efficiency.
go. Thank you.
I just
Thank you.
I just pulled that one out too.
There you go. So what it'll tell you then is if you know your OEE and you're scheduling and you've got a job that's going to take 100 hours and you go to put it and you want to put it in that machining center, you're not going to get it out in 100 hours worth of time because there are other factors. So again, there are a lot of companies that'll work on, hey, how do I optimize OEE? I think world class is like about 70, 80%. So,
Hmm.
maybe you made it to 90 once in a while. So how do you optimize that? Well, you look at, micro stoppages, changeover time, predictive maintenance. There's a lot of things you can do to tighten up that number. The challenge is, in my independent consulting days, I ran across a lot of companies that had great OEE and they were losing money.
Oh my, that's sort of not the point there.
Well, it's circling back to the ERP thing. It's because so much happens before and after that machining center. What's going on with your whip? Did you schedule the right thing? Are you running what needs to be shipped? This month or within whatever time frame it is that you need to have it done. Is it backed up in quality before it goes to shipping? Is it still at outside service and nobody's really managed, or we didn't get a
And
flag?
all those things you just described are where the role of ERP comes in, right? It's all those other pieces.
It's,
So you're saying a company that's solely focused on just getting my equipment efficiency really great,
yeah,
while it sounds like a great goal, that doesn't necessarily translate to
bingo,
profitability
bingo.
because it doesn't take into account that to build a product, it starts way back at the beginning
Sure
with
does.
marketing and sales and getting a lead and quoting it right and pricing it right.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
oh yeah.
started a long time ago.
All of this and the quoting and pricing. What are you basing that on?
Yeah.
What are you basing it on data, or is it well, if I can get twice the material cost, I know I'm making money. Really? Are you really? you know, so there's an awful lot
Let's
that
talk
goes into it.
about that for a minute. Did your thinking as far as how to price something evolve over the years?
Oh, sure it did. Well,
So,
once you got more data,
yeah.
and you could look at it, the challenge is part of that evolution. You really need your finance people or involved in that, because rightfully so, they should double check. Hey, what are we using for a machine rate? How are we pricing? Direct labor and those types of things. But if your accounting mindset isn't manufacturing informed, you get to that point where, hey, when the business is really rocking, here's what my machine rate is. Here's what I need to charge that next job coming in the door. Then you hit a downturn, and the exact opposite things happens. Accounting comes out and goes, you know, that when we were busy, we could, you know, $100 machine rate was fine, but now that we're slow, we need 350. I'd say you'll never win another job that way.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
Yeah.
so it's pricing's can be a different, that's a whole nother topic, but it does evolve in the presence of data.
It does. It does.
It does, you know.
And with the ERP system is supposed to give you that foresight ahead of time
Yeah.
of the material, the labor, the outside processes that are going to be
especially
involved.
now, the tools that are there between, you know, AI and the compute power that's available, the opportunity for smaller businesses to start modeling, that was unheard of. I mean, that was the big companies years ago, you know, Motorola, where they would model, you know, what's going on. They had billions of dollars. You know, the small vendor to them, they couldn't do that type of stuff. But now, you know, being able to run some scenarios, some what ifs, you know, where you're seeing, you know, the MES system, manufacturing execution system, that one I know, out on the shop floor, you know, is not, you can now look at, because it does factor in OEE, it does factor in, you know, WIP, and routing times and everything else like that. And so you can now model and say, hey, GE Aerospace wants to give me the, you know, if we win this contract, what's it going to look like on the floor?
Right.
You know, what's going to happen, as opposed to sell and repent. You know, hey, we won look how busy we are. We
Sell
must
and
be.
repent. I haven't heard those
Yeah.
terms before, but something is definitely going wrong if you have to sell and repent.
Well, I'm a recovering sales guy, so
Ah.
I've had the ability, you know, on the one hand, you know, pat myself on the back because I buried the factory in new work, which is nice. But as I moved into, you know, more into operations and management roles, I started to understand, and this circles back to ERP selection as well.
Yeah.
If manufacturing's not at the table when you're talking about these things, it's a recipe for disaster. It'll cost you more to dig out than whatever missed opportunity you think there is. You know, but we could have been contenders. You know, it's like, yeah, really? You dodged a bullet.
Yeah,
You know?
I would say that's a theme I'm already hearing so far. It seems that finance is looking at ERP most often, thinking, I need more data, I need to make better financial decisions. And perhaps even sales would look at it and say, hey, I want to know what product lines are the most profitable.
Yeah.
Ideally, you know, this would
Yeah.
be great information. But if manufacturing's not at the table, I love that quote.
Oh, and I learned that the hard way, because when I transitioned out of the sales side into the operations and leadership side, all the sales team was like, "Hey, this is going to be great. One of ours is leading the charge," and I figured out real quickly that you know, we better get our arms around this, you know, because I saw what was happening. You know, you bring up a good point about, hey, if sales saw what was most profitable, yeah, they'll be interested in that if they're compensated based on selling what's most profitable versus selling what's easy. Because what's easy is what gets loaded up first in the factory, and that's where manufacturing comes in and says, don't sell any more 400-ton work because it's a 6-month lead time for a new press and $1 million and everything else. However, we're idle over here, or we've got capacity. Why don't you find something to fill here? Now we balance things out. There are those kinds of conversations that need to be able to happen. You won't get there without data. You know, it's just the manufacturing guy knows he's overloaded, you know, because he looks at his scheduling board and, you know, he knows he's going to be behind. They know they're going to be behind.
So often it seems like the ERP data is just validating what other people are already experiencing, but somehow not able to voice, or it doesn't get through to the top.
If it's working well, yes. Then if you can get that correlation happening where the ERP reflects what's really going on in the floor, you've got it.
You're doing it right.
You're doing it right. The next step is, and a challenge in ERP implementations is, you know, it shifts who owns data, because it creates this common source of truth that everybody deals with. Well, if purchasing was used to, well, I know my vendors and I know what's going on. Well, all of a sudden now, you know, everybody in the company knows lead times about what's going on. So as data gets democratized, that's a change indicator. Something is going to change because people can no longer protect the information in their domain. It's now part of something to help everyone make decisions. So that's one thing. The second thing is, if you change who has access and visibility to the data, are you changing who has authority to make decisions?
Hmm.
Because if the person on the shop floor, well, if I'm being measured based on, throughput from my work cell,
Mm-hmm.
then I would like input in, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
how which is good, but you better get ready for that. You can't be a command and control organization one day and then say, with the new ERP, something magic is going to occur, and now we all talk and communicate with each other, and you are now empowered to make decisions. Until they make one leadership doesn't agree with, and then the hammer comes down, and everybody's afraid to make decisions again. So it's challenging, you
Yeah,
know.
I love that. I've seen shops that are command and control shops, and
Hmm.
I've seen shops that are truly invested in their employees and giving voice to their employees, and they create a team
Yep,
culture.
yep,
And I imagine right now, talking of change management, I'm thinking about the generations that you've watched come through and
yeah,
how they respond to leadership and the needs that we have to fill those positions to
yep,
keep those employees engaged.
yeah,
I would think that getting someone to fill out. I would say getting someone to fill out a screen is not nearly as intimidating today because they all have an iPhone in their pocket.
good point.
So it's gotten easier
Sure.
from that regard. But getting buy-in and getting that communication is still a challenge.
Yep.
And how are you seeing the generational impact?
What I'm seeing, and I've got a wonderful lens through Valley Industrial Association, because we have for the last 6-7 years now, we have a benchmarking tool that
Okay.
we give our members access to, and it covers 6 areas, two of which are really key in this conversation. It revolves around culture and workforce development. And I recently did some analysis, and we split it up: big company, small company. And in our world, small company is, say, 50 employees and down, and larger companies are bigger. Our largest employers are probably a 2 to 500, employees, largest members. So I went through the data for culture and workforce, because in my world, those things are inextricably linked. I had about 4,000 data points that I was able to take a look at, and some interesting stuff shook out of it. Smaller companies, the
Mm-hmm.
ones probably struggling the most to find workforce
Yeah.
and retain workforce, are actually making progress towards best practices faster than large
Really?
companies are. And I think there's a couple of things that are in play here. One is environment does make a huge difference now, and especially the younger generation coming in. They want to feel that their voice is heard, that they can be engaged in what's going on, take some ownership in what's happening, and smart business leaders are recognizing that. We should probably look at how do we institutionalize some of this as opposed to posters on the wall. What are some of the behaviors that we can model and encourage and search for when we're bringing people on board, and how do we
Yeah.
treat them when they get here, and do we circle back and get their feedback and engagement surveys, and those types of things. And I believe that, and I've seen it, where technology is a draw. Where if you're doing some stuff that's pretty advanced, that's appealing, for a young person. If they come into a shop, and it's clean, and you see some automation happening, and people are working on cool stuff, and there's data and there's screens, and it's happening for a reason. It's not a dog and pony show. I look at somebody like Jim Carr,
Yeah.
and what's he
Yeah.
doing? He's doing a car machine. I remember when they were in the old building doing
Yeah.
stuff for the printing industry. Fast forward now in the new shop, state of the art. That was always the vision. So there was leadership mindset, for that type of thing. And to Jim and his team's credit, they saw that was going to be integral in staff development, in
Yeah.
attraction, in retention. And that's kind of a key thing now. It should be in manufacturers, is they really need to look at making workforce development a core competency, just like engineering is.
And you described the screens versus the posters.
Yeah.
I heard that, and immediately it came to mind how we now have the ability to take data from these different systems
Mhm.
and put them into dashboards and
Yeah.
present them live on the shop floor.
Yep.
And I've heard the term the gamification.
Mm-hmm.
So when we can bring some sort of gamification and fun to
Yeah.
that environment where
Yep.
there are goals and they're visible and the data is live,
Yep.
this sounds like part of what's keeping those younger people engaged.
It's critical because you can't have the mindset of, well, when I started 40 years ago, they gave me a block of steel and a file, and you know, and then and it's like, and you suck it up for 4 years, and then we'll give you a toolbox. That ship has sailed. It's people learn differently today than they did before. We didn't have YouTube when I was coming up. Didn't have podcasts. Didn't have the internet. So it's just so different, and the people that are adapting to that are winning.
They're winning.
They're winning.
And I want to see those, especially those small to mid-sized manufacturers, particularly, giving them those, what do they need to do
Yeah.
to win? And selecting this ERP is important to this process. Engaging that workforce, it sounds like.
Here's what I recommend too. It's to companies. For decades, people have been saying how important it is for collaboration among manufacturers. I came up at a time when it was like somebody wanted to visit the factory. Oh, we can't leave the conference room because what we do back there is proprietary.
Top secret.
Yeah. Well, what do you do? Well, we've got a multi-axis CNC, and we do some grind. Your competitive advantage these days is really it's your company culture. It's your unique data set that you have that you know how to do something with, and your ability to innovate. And if you can kind of optimize for that equation in the presence of a rapidly changing environment, you're kind of good. It's kind of like Elon Musk. It's not the product; it's the factory. The factory's the product. It's like, what do you need us to build? Cars, robots, satellites. Let's do that.
So, yeah, boy, isn't that the truth?
So it's mindset. So the collaboration thing, I think, is so important, which leads me to my point, which is find ways to meet like-minded people or somebody that's at perhaps a different point in their manufacturing journey where you can have a good conversation, leader to leader, whether that's through an association, another industry trade group, whatever it happens to be. Seek out people that are successful, and ask them, what did it? They're not giving you the special sauce. If it's culture, you got to figure that one out. And there's ways you can get help there. But if it's around selection and implementation and those things, I haven't met anybody yet that's not willing to sit down and have a conversation with another owner. They're not that scary. They look like it, but it's like, sit down and talk to me. Hey, how was your journey? What did that look like?
That's good.
That's
good to sit down, talk to someone.
Yeah.
So you went forward with Epicor across a big lot of change really quick. It sounds like multiple nations or locations.
Yep.
How long did it take you to actually implement? When did you say you were done, and what did success look like?
I want to say we cut over in 18 months, which was too fast. We cut over in 18 months and probably spent the next 2 years mopping up.
Oh, man.
Yeah. While growing.
While growing.
Yeah.
Did you have to have extra resources to people then?
Oh,
you
yeah.
said you added people.
Profitability was every time volume went up, costs went up. Volume went up, costs went up. Yeah, it was.
It doesn't sound like the promise of ERP at all.
No, it was. And at the end of it was just like everybody hated everybody. You hated the system. You hated the brand. And I think a lot of it was around the different facilities had kind of different perspectives. The China plant did it best, because they stuck to their guns, and it was like, it's going to replicate our process. And here's how we're going to do it. The rest of them, it was just like.
Did you go live across all these places at one time, or did you do one at a time? I mean, this is significant.
The U.S. site was up first, and hindsight is our guide. The U.S. site was still struggling, and we rolled elsewhere. Kept it going. So it was a challenge.
mopping up 2 years. You added resources.
Yeah.
It did not deliver on its promise.
No.
Did it eventually, like at some point, did you say, yeah, turn the corner and
It
we're
was,
glad we have it?
you know what? We reached a point of equilibrium. I wasn't there long enough. Not, I didn't get canned because of that. Left on my own for the record. But it reached a point where it was like, all right, we kind of quit complaining about it. It was
Yeah.
it was doing something, but it never fully realized the promise of what it should have been, and I think we just had to focus elsewhere. So it wasn't a good experience.
Sounds like it took years to get to that point
It did.
of equilibrium.
It was brutal. That was brutal, but for a lot of different factors. So my point is, for the small and mid-sized manufacturers that are on this journey,
Yeah.
and either need to implement for their first time or they're upgrading, or something like that. Number one, their business is never going to be less complex than it is right now. That's a sad fact. Know what your processes are, have them documented. Even if they're not optimized, have them documented before you go on the ERP search, so you know what it is. Well, explain to me how this scheduling thing happens, or how do we set up bill of materials? How do I address, well, it came off the machine, but now it needs to go out to heat treat, and when it comes back, it needs to get assembled. So what is my bill of material? How do I track that? And how do I track the value of it? One of the hardest things for us is, we had so much stuff going on. It was having an accurate measurement of WIP, because, we had so many presses, so much volume going on, that at any given time across the whole organization, there was millions of dollars in WIP, which is cash. Is it the right WIP? What shape is it in?
Right.
Where is it in the process?
So, physically knowing what you have
and where it is. Yeah.
And that could have been maybe addressed somewhat with bill of materials, and how did you address that?
That was a lot of the ERP tools gave us a way to quantify it, so we
Okay.
knew where it was. We came up with some mechanisms for valuation. And again, a lot of accounting stuff, as long as you're consistent in how you apply it, doesn't have to be to the exact penny. So if it came off the press, it's worth half the selling price. When it's done being packaged and shipped, now it's worth the full selling price, or cost, however you want to look at it. So eventually got better at figuring out what the value was and where it was, which was way better than just a swag based on historical. At this level of sales volume, we typically have this much WIP, so use that for the WIP number that goes into our financials at the end of the month, until we do an end of the year full inventory adjustment and have a big surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, before ERP, there's a lot of swag going on.
Yeah.
You're having to just make
rules of thumb. Yeah.
rules of thumb, make some estimations and things, and now you start to see real data.
Yeah.
But in your case, it took literally years before you got there.
Yeah.
With a good size organization
Yeah.
by the end of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
A cautionary tale.
a cautionary tale. I hear you.
Get everybody at the table. Know your processes up front, or if you want to spend some time, bring in a lean consultant, or have somebody come in and do some value stream mapping. Make your changes while you're still, if it's not good on paper, you're only going to automate chaos. So it's like, if you get it figured out first. The ideal world would be, you do some value stream mapping, you've got some lean continuous improvement methodologies in there that are helping tighten your processes. That way you move something good and you automate it.
Oh, I love that idea. I really do. I think immediately about bin locations. Like know where you physically store things
Right.
before you implement an ERP system. Already have a plan mapped out for that, and value streaming that. So you're saying there's some really great pre-steps before ERP, which
If
could
I had to
make
do it
this a
again,
lot better.
If I was running a small and medium-sized organization now, knowing what I know and the experiences that I've had, I would put some effort into value stream mapping. There's a lot of great resources. A lot of great folks, are part of our association. There's, IMAC, the MEP.
What does value stream mapping mean exactly?
It's tracking, it can be everything from, operations on the shop floor. A lot of times with ERP, it's the office related stuff. Purchase order comes in, what happens? Who looks at it? Who loads it in the system? How does it trigger purchasing? What are all the steps involved in that? And what you do is, okay, it starts here, it goes here, 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 and you end up with, capturing every step in a process before you get to, the desired result, which is, hey, good parts out the door. So, in this cycle, and you assign time values, real ones, because you go check to see what happens, and you sequence these things out, and you may find that by the time a purchase order comes in the door and hits the shop floor, there might be 2 weeks of activity before it ever gets, into production. Just using it as an example. Well, now that you've got this map, you can look at where is it waiting, and why is it waiting? Why does it take so much time to get from here to here? And you can start re-engineering that process. And I've seen it happen where, processes have gone from months to days. I've seen it, in very complex.
Well, once it's visible, people are like, wait, it shouldn't be sitting on your desk for that long. And I'm thinking about backups. Like, who's the backup person when purchasing is out? Does that mean that we now are going to be a week later on all of our parts because nobody was there to place the PO?
Exactly. Or in the presence of some process automation that's out there, it's not solely dedicated to robotic process automation. If there's something that regularly goes through approvals and 90% of the time, it passes through, but here are the exceptions.
Yeah.
Now you can build in tools, automation tools. PO comes in, optical character recognition happens. It looks for all of these fields. The approval, it's automatically routed. Decisions are made, exceptions are flagged right away. Boom, here it goes.
One of the things I like about that too is that if you have a process, even if it's not optimal as you described, and you're going to see that it's not optimal,
right?
Don't wait too long to get it perfect. You have to go with something.
Right.
But now part of that ERP is going to address a lot of those issues.
Right.
It's going to make it faster. It's going to put it up on people's screens. And I think that I see people struggle to say, where's my ROI?
Yeah.
Like, how do I really measure what was the improvement? What you just described was something very specific. The amount of time it takes from when I get a purchase order from a customer to the day I start manufacturing, or the day that the work order is ready to be manufactured. Those times that's good.
Well, part of that mindset, we're all used to logging into Amazon, ordering something, and we get it the next day.
Yeah.
That found its way into manufacturing a while ago. So leading companies, even in contract manufacturing, leading companies are now, you can send in your file and almost in real time get a quote back and send it back and say, okay,
And that's happening because of technology.
Yeah.
This is not because someone sat there on their calculator and added it up.
Absolutely. And, as I think about it and we talk through it, that spaghetti diagram of that, that value stream map for that process.
Yeah.
If you don't do that up front, the first time you have the conversation about how complex that is when you're trying to get the ERP to mirror it, and it won't, or it can't, or you got to customize it. And it's like, should you really?
Or maybe it really wasn't the best stream.
Bingo. That's my point.
Yeah.
It's
and maybe it wasn't. And sometimes just asking the questions and writing it down, there's a lot of revelation that we could do better than this.
Yeah.
And it just takes someone to be intentional about it rather than just working in their business, right? It's working on the business.
Absolutely. You have to be able to take a step back, with an outsider's perspective. And you can go borrow that, or if you're fortunate enough to be able to look at it and kind of interrogate your own, your own processes, it's like, ask questions. Just ask why. Why do we do it like this?
Yeah.
Ask the person doing it.
Why?
How could it be? They probably got a good idea, about how it should be done,
Yeah.
So, are we clocking out?
Anyhow,
Oh,
well,
yeah, we're sorry.
uh-oh. Well, I told you an hour flies by so quickly, Ray.
It
So
did. Thank you.
thank you so much. Boy, lots of great nuggets today,
I
lots
hope
of
so.
words of wisdom for sure. And I'm excited to get this into the hands of our audience. So thank you so much for coming and sharing.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Every month, I'll be bringing in leaders, operators, and experts who aren't afraid to share what really happens when you take on ERP. Together, we'll build a library of honest insights that manufacturers can rely on. Whether you're planning for ERP now or preparing for the future, I'm Rose of Sharon, and this is the place for straight talk on how to make your shop flow.